Once upon a time, there's a little boy named Jack. As with all 5-year-old kids, Jack's favorite time of day was story time with his mom. Jack learned that the small, fluffy animal with yellow hair and a pointy beak is spelled as C-H-I-C-K. As he learned more and more words, he couldn't wait to enjoy story time on his own, chasing bigger monsters and going on bigger quests and longer, more intricate stories. Jack practices reading every day, but by his 5th birthday, he could still only read mostly picture books. Jack couldn't read. He tried and tried. His dad even bought him a new book for his birthday, but it was just no use. Jack felt like his mind was moving too fast and the letters were flying by too quickly to string them together. He just couldn't sit still and focus. Desperate to figure it out, little Jack tried everything and anything he could to learn how to read. No matter what Jack did, he was still unable to slow his mind enough to catch the words rushing past across the page. The stories of great knights and pirate ships were just beyond his reach. One day, while playing outside, the sky flashed bright orange. There was a loud crash, and then a ring-shaped superhero appeared before him.
Hello, Jack. I'm Methylphenidate, but people call me Captain Ritalin. I've noticed that you are having some trouble learning to read, and I think I have something that will help you.
Captain Ritalin held out a glowing, bright orange capsule. Little Jack took the capsule and put it in his mouth. A few minutes later, he began to feel strange. He started to glow, and gradually, he began to feel his mind slowed down.
Pardon the interruption, but this story is actually about science. Children with attention deficit hyperactive disorder have characteristically low levels of intrasynaptic dopamine in the synaptic cleft between neurons at rest. Therapeutic strategies for this condition tend to focus on increasing resting intrasynaptic dopamine levels in the brain. Methylphenidate, commonly referred to by its drug name Ritalin, competitively binds to the ligand binding site of the D2 dopamine receptor on the axons of neurons and the dopaminergic pathways of the prefrontal cortex. The D2 dopamine receptor is a globular intramembrane G-protein coupled receptor embedded in the neuronal lipid bilayer. Dopamine binding to the D2 receptor initiates dopamine transport from the synaptic cleft across the cell membrane into the body of the cell, a process called reuptake. Ritalin binding at the binding site acts as a competitive inhibitor, blocking dopamine, thereby inhibiting the D2 receptor's ability to reuptake dopamine molecules. This increases the resting concentration of dopamine in the synaptic cleft to more normal levels, increasing attention span and reducing hyperactive tendencies. Because dopamine and Ritalin are structurally similar, they interact in the binding pocket of the D2 receptor the same way. Let's take a closer look. Here is the D2 receptor, and here you can see the dopamine binding domain, highlighted in red. It's composed of 7 alpha helices. If we zoom in, we can see the 3 amino acids that bind with the ligand in the binding pocket. Valine 190 shares a hydrophobic interaction with the 3rd carbon of the aromatic ring in methylphenidate. Valine 115 also shares a hydrophobic interaction with the 1st carbon of the same aromatic ring. Aspartate 114 accepts the hydrogen from the amino group, forming a hydrogen bond. The shared structural characteristics of dopamine and Ritalin is what allows Ritalin to compete with dopamine in the binding pocket, inhibiting dopamine reuptake and returning Jack's extracellular dopamine levels back to normal. We now return you to your regularly scheduled episode of Hyperactive Jack.
Little Jack grabbed his new book and looked at the pages. The letters weren't rushing off the page anymore. He could focus on each one long enough to string them together into words, and then string the words into sentences. He was reading. Jack spent the rest of his childhood reading anything he could get his hands on. Eventually, not so little Jack went on to medical school and became a psychiatrist so that he could help other kids slow down and focus as well, with the help of his trusty friend, Captain Ritalin.